Hello, hello, hello. Welcome, everybody. Welcome to the Astropub. Here's the thing. Someone last time said, I'd like you to do Star Citizen music in the background, and since Pedro lets us use this music, I can put it in the background for office hours. There's some good ambience that CIG has for the games. So, welcome, everybody. Yeah, welcome. The All-Star Anthem. And this is the Contacts Inbound, I believe, or The Storm is Coming. All right, let's get to the office, shall we? At the very beginning, to talk a little bit more about this. Hey, Paddock. All right, I'm in the wrong scene. Office hours. There we go. Maybe it just suddenly jumped to my face. Oh, it's back there. Ha, there we go. Welcome, everybody. Out of focus, Paul. Welcome. My name is Paul Berserker01, Batman Shelley, your humble host and space bartender at the Astropub, your facilitator at the captain's table, and your host on Galactic, or your professor, Galactic historian. So a lot of stuff happened today. Just today. And it's going to be hard to break a lot of this stuff down. I'll start off with the obvious one, because people have been quoting me as a dev for some reason. I'm not a dev. I simply know a lot of people who work at CIG Austin, and I've known a lot of people who worked at CIG Austin since before they were devs. People in DevOps, people in art, people in QA, so on and so forth. I'm trying to think of all the people I know. I would say there's like, before they worked at CIG, a good solid 6 of them. And I know enough, I'm close enough to enough of them who work at CIG who say about 5 to 6 more. It's a total of like 12-ish people of a company. And I believe CIG Austin has something like 50 to 60 employees. So I would say it's a good cross-section of the company. I'm not going to give it a ton of gas, just explain what was in the news. So Kotaku came out with an article saying that several CIG employees were upset that, as far as I could tell, because the article is a little all over the place, that they were upset that they were asked to come into work during the snowstorm that we had here a couple of weeks ago, and or use their PTO. And at some point, this was rectified after the fact, and everyone was paid for their time, even if they didn't work. So the Kotaku, that's the long and the short of it. The issue I have with the article is that it makes it seems like this is a common practice in CIG, and that CIG is really, you don't have to take my word for it. You can say what you want. I just am upset that there's a lot of people who do good work at CIG Austin, who are dedicated to what they do and are treated fairly well. And this seems more malicious, as it were, as an attack on them professionally, as professionals, that they're professionally irresponsible or upset. And if this was true, if they were mistreated to a degree where they felt like they needed to complain to Kotaku, I would 100% say, okay, cool. There's obviously some issue going on, if not just with this with these employees, but possibly more than that. The problem I have with the article is that it's all anonymous. There's no quoted tweets. There's no screenshots of emails. It's all just believe us. We talked with these 6 people. Believe us. And I'm not too into the whole what people have done in the past is 100% what they'll do in the future. But Gawker Media isn't exactly known for their upfront honesty or their integrity. There was only one person I ever really liked in Gawker, one reporter, and that was Jason Schreier, who no longer works for them. And I believe he didn't even leave on good terms when he left with Kotaku. So Kotaku has its own issues, and I'm not saying that Kotaku is, straight up lying. It feels like they are, And I'm not saying this isn't necessarily untrue. I'm just saying that a lot of this, what was said, doesn't seem congruent with my own experience. And let me give you an example. I have gone drinking with CIG employees on the weekends, every so often, in the before times, before COVID. Gone bowling. I've hung out and played, games with them on stream even, that are not Star Citizen, Sea of Thieves and such. And the only time I ever felt that CIG was probably pushing their employees too hard was, I believe, 2 years ago around January, where we were going bowling, and I saw there was 2 or 3 of them were there with us, hanging out bowling, and they look absolutely wiped. Like they just hadn't slept in days. And I talked with them about it, and they were just like, yeah, we've been busting our butt. Like usually we're used to January and February being a cool down time, but we just went straight into it from January, February, and we're exhausted. And while that is concerning, it was almost immediately after that CIG implemented the staggered rotation for their teams. And one of the reasons why CIG issued staggered rotation was because it was burning out devs. They said it in their announcement of it, and they wanted to let people know. Everyone focused on the fact that, it'll bring content out faster, but just completely missed the fact that it was there to keep retention in and prevent burnout. So I'm not saying don't believe victims. I'm a big proponent of cooperatively owned businesses, even video games, for worker-owned businesses like video game companies. I'm a huge proponent for labor rights and for unionization of game workers. But I'm also not. I'm going to call if I see something that seems not correct, I'm going to call it out for that. Especially when it seems very malicious in its intent. That's it. That's all I'm going to say about it, because it's something that I don't want to feed any more flames to it, just because it really should be something that we just dismiss and move on. And we'll move on to other stuff. We'll talk about the Star Citizen lore and stuff. Question: has there been any significant upticks or milestones in Twitch, YouTube coverage at Star Citizen that brought about increased coverage from fairly large-scale content creators? Anything you've noticed from your perspective? Yeah. Morph. Blame Morph. Thank you, Morph. So Morphologist, for those who don't know, brought in Linus Tech Tips, and Linus and his team to come play Star Citizen. Linus has been a Star Citizen backer, and many people in his team have been Star Citizen backers for many years. But they don't play the game a lot. So either Morph knows them or managed to get in contact with them. Morph is a very charismatic dude. I've talked with him privately in the past. I'm trying to get him on the captain's table at some point. But him bringing on Linus is a huge deal, because Linus and Linus Tech Tips as a team are huge. They're a massive team that have a lot of influence on YouTube. So it's not surprising that Templin Institute would do a thing on Star Citizen and then do the other thing I don't have to talk about here in a bit. It seemed like inside gaming piece, aka rumors and hearsay. It is. I mean, I'm not going to go too in depth on that, but I'm also not saying don't believe people who come out and say there's abuse or there's some other issues. 100% do that. The problem I have is I don't know who was abused. I don't know who this happened to. It's just an anonymous name in an article by a company that's not exactly the most reputable source of the industry. So it becomes, I don't know what to believe. Do I believe the company that I have no personal relationship with, or the people whom I've known for years who tell me the opposite? I'm going to believe those folks. Riley did say he's working on a tech link piece about Star Citizen. Okay, yeah. Yeah, Linus seemed like he really there for the video content. Morphin Space Tomato Captain Sable at some point, yes. It'll probably, here's the reality. If I'm going to do a Morph video, it's going to be Morph and Salty Mike is what it'll be. It'll be Salty Mike and Morph. because they know each other well, they work well together, and we'll have a nice big think piece. So. Back on to the other content. What we're going to talk about? We're going to talk about lore. I'll wear the suit jacket and everything. Yes. Let's go through comments. Hey, Jumpy Lemming. I'm doing well. Thank you. Thank you, man. I am doing well. So, let's go on about the lore. So, I'm going to talk about this just for people who don't have a lot of insight in the lore. And I'm going to start with the basics, since a lot of people seem to be confused about specific things like the government structure, and the history. So one of the things that a lot of people don't realize is that the government structure of the UEE is, and let me pull up a government structure map. Pull up a good structure of it. Okay. Here's a good image. It's really, really small though. I'll do the ghetto way of doing it. Yes. There we go. Blow it up to 1,000 times. Because you went to Stealthy Mike on ATC. I'm glad to hear you coming in. Hey, UE Navy. We're talking about you today. Reclaimer lore? Yeah, at some point. Lore question. Does the UEE have the equivalent of the CIA agency? We don't know. The advocacy would probably be the closest, but there is military intelligence of some kind. But yeah, could be. But Paul, you and Mike never managed to schedule anything together, and you will bring the Taiwan dude into the mix? Yes. What I'm going to do is I'm going to sacrifice a day sometime in the near future where I can bring in Mike, because Mike is available during the day, and the Taiwan dude and Morph, who's available in the late evening. His late evenings would be my mornings or my afternoons, and we'll come together on like a Wednesday and do a captain stable, because we've done that in the past. So. It's not a jump truck. It's a mobile truck. We need a dump truck made of dump trucks. That's the lore you need. Yes. iCache strikes back. Yes. Yes, we're going to talk about something that we'll talk about that a little bit later, but that is something that specifically Supermac Bros Ryan. He actually pointed this out because a tech savvy person of his it's pointed out from a comment, which is interesting. So this is the current structure of the UEE, and I'm going to go through it piece by piece. Now, the reason why this structure exists is because at some point, we'll step it back even further. The first government of humanity is called the UNE, or the United Nations of Earth. It was formed from the United Nations structure and kept a lot of the United Nations structure intact. It also introduced the Citizen Program. Now, the Citizen Program is a way of reducing the sheer volume of people involved in government as a means to manage and control those who only have a vested interest in keeping the government alive. So things like veterans. So the Citizen Program was introduced during the UNE as a way to encourage people to sign up, to get voting rights and such like that. But it was, for all intents and purposes, the UN working as a federal republic. So each nation still had a say. In fact, the nations of Earth had more say than any of the planets or nations of the Sol system or any other system, because they were more numerous. So, and of course, in the The UNE, in this future, the UNE actually has not nation states, but sort of mega states. So it's things like the EU. So you'd have like the North American Union or the North American Protectorate and the East Asian Trading Bloc or whatever. These mega states that would exist. There'd be smaller states, but usually these huge, larger super state powers would exist. And those are the ones who were represented in the UNE. This system worked well because the UN had a lot of power, and thus the Earth had a lot of power. But then that changed in the distant future as humanity left Earth. Earth became emptied out. It became less and less populated as people spread out amongst the stars. Then in, I can't remember the exact date, I have to look it up, but at some point in the distant future, actually, let me just look it up real quick. 2523, the UNE was reformatted into the UPE. Now, this version was an attempt to consolidate power, because even the UN was still an old Earth establishment. The UPE, or the United Planets of Earth, was designed to be a much broader range, specifically to bring in more voices from outside. However, the citizen program still existed. The citizenship program meant that you had some basic rights, but you were mostly, the only rights you only had the right to vote and hold office if you were a citizen. And the only way to gain citizenship was service in the government. So we have a limited pool of citizens who are still running the place. However, because these citizens are no longer just on Earth, but spread out amongst the stars, those citizens advocated for reform, so reform happened. This is important to point out. The citizen system, as it works, is really more like an oligopoly, or I should say an oligarchy, rather than a democracy. It's just a very accessible oligarchy. Anyone can get it. It just requires, risking your life. And very few people need to, because it's a federal republic, the individuals, planets, and nations were left to fend for themselves. They were allowed to do anything they wanted as long as it didn't overrule the central government's authority, which is a lot, because it was pretty loose power grab until the First Tavaran War. The First Tavaran War happened, and it caused a lot of issues. Oh, I think I have to back up a little bit because we didn't talk about the High Secretary. So what you see right here, the High Secretary, the High Command, and the High Advocate, replace this with High General, and this is the structure of the government. Essentially what the UE was simply a modified version of the UPE. This is where I would consider I would critique CIG a little bit, because there's really no reason for the triumvirate, for the tribunal to exist. These three powers, there's really not any discussion by why it happens, other than it just did. If I was to venture a guess based off of lore reasons, it had a lot to do with dealing with the realities of a much bigger group of people. You're dealing with a much bigger expanse of space that requires a lot more centralized power, but centralized power that's not just located on Earth. It also requires much more immediate attention. If something goes wrong, you need someone who's in charge who can say, hey, military, go that way. And if you need someone to deal with the law enforcement or dealing with laws, you need someone who's in charge of that. So these are more structured, precise roles. And each of these roles are elected, and they kind of have to work together in order to make the government work. So you still have some balance of power. The military can't function if it doesn't have the money to pay for tanks. If it can't pay for tanks, that means they can't fight wars. So the military has to go to the Congress or the High Secretary and ask for money. Same with the High Advocate. But the High Advocate gets to interpret and enforce the laws as they please, and the military gets to use their power as they need be. They don't necessarily need to actually have a declaration of war in order to deal with things. So there are some checks and balances between each of them. They work together in the scenes. It's not crystal clear, but that's probably one of my bigger critiques of this system. It just seems like it exists because it existed in Rome. Now, they forgot Space Force. Yes. Hey, Loken. Thanks for that 19 months, man. Advocacy is also kind of the judicial branch. Yes, they are. So let's start with the high advocacy, because the advocacy is kind of a little bit weird. So the high advocate, or the advocacy, is a combination of a federal police force and a federal judge system. There's been no references of courts, so there actually may not be federal courts in the UEE. Period. I don't know how they enforce laws, but it may be that, and this is just a kind of an idea, is that local laws and local judges will deal with crimes, and their punishment is left up to the individual local authorities. The advocacy is there just to enforce the law, and it's up to the local authorities to enact the law. So, Advocate Dredd, I'm here for it. Yeah. So the FBI and DOJ are combined rather than compartmentalized. Sort of. And the advocacy is a big force. And I think the advocacy is probably one of the least defined groups that CIG has done. The idea behind the advocacy is that they're specters. They're marshals on the frontier. They've got a lot of leeway to do what they want, how they want to, but they're not just like the only force in town, sort of thing. I don't know. So then we move on to the High Command. Now, the High Command under the UPE was called the High General. They were in charge of the Army and the Navy. The Marines were formed afterwards from a combination of the Army and the Navy. The Army's job is to protect ground-based assets, so protecting planets, bases, moons, those sorts of things, from invasion and to invade those areas. The Navy's job is to do everything in between, transport the Army, and protect the space lanes. And then the Marines are sort of a hybrid of the two. They're basically a special forces unit that acts independently of the Army and the Navy. Think of them as a SOCOM sort of situations. That they're a joint operations special forces teams with their own carriers. So they're kind of the elite group of small groups. So if something serious happens, like you need someone to invade a planet that's heavily occupied, you send in the Marines. If you need to, if there's too many forces in that place, then you send in the Army. But if it's like, hey, there's this outlaw group that's operating in this asteroid belt, you send in the Marines, not the Army or the Navy. You could send in the Navy, but the Marines are more well equipped to deal with that sort of situation. So, High General. Kind of dystopian. Yeah, the UPE is kind of dystopian. It's the best way of describing the government of Star Citizen is the government of the Star Citizen is not the hero. It is a protagonist. Not necessarily the best, not necessarily the worst, but definitely not a hero. And the advocacy sends the CDF, yes. So those are the different forces. And since the UEE was formed, the High General was replaced with the High Command, which is a group of seeming kind of like the Joint Chiefs of Staff. Members of the Marines, Navy, and Army serve together as an advisory force and to control the military forces. Essentially, this is the military without civilian oversight. So think the Department of Defense in the United States, but with no civilian leaders. That can be bad, but it can also be more efficient because there's a lot of decisions made by civilian leaders in the military which have to do more with policy decisions and like benefactors for things like running campaigns, rather than military defense purposes. But it also means that you've got a military which self-runs itself. So, the best way of kind of explaining the territory of the Army, Navy, and the Marines is that the Army sits on the ground, Navy flies in space, Marines do both. But They have more advanced weapons and training, but they're smaller in number. Then we get the High Secretary. Now, in a recent video, which we'll talk about in a bit, they seem to get confused. Many people seem to get confused about what the High Secretary is because of descriptions, old descriptions from like version 1 of the lore. To break it down very simply, the High Secretary is a prime minister. Their job is to deal with local issues that are internal to the UEE. They deal with the bureaucracies of state, the agriculture department, the Department of the Interior, the Department of Infrastructure, whatever. They deal with those day-to-day things. However, they're also essentially the Speaker of the House or the Majority Leader in the Senate in the United States. They are the leader of the Senate. So they are the head of the Senate. They function kind of like the Vice President of the United States does in that sense. And they set policy. However, in the UEE, their policy is dictated from the Imperator. The High Secretary used to be elected. I don't know if it's elected still. Because it seems to me that it's likely chosen by the Imperator rather than elected, though it could be similar to the Speaker of the House, where the High Secretary is elected by the Senate in terms of who gets to be the High Secretary, based off of whoever is in charge. So then we have Congress, which is the Senate. The Senate deals with internal matters, external matters, ratifying treaties, any of the business of law. They have their own subcommittees on everything you can imagine, and they work in tandem with the High Secretary to ensure that the internal matters of the UEE are dealt with. But here's the kicker. Nobody else in the UEE can do anything without the approval of the Congress, of the Senate. There are some degrees of leeway. For instance, the military can act pretty much unilaterally if they need to, and the advocacy can act on things like arrests and judgment of individuals on their own. However, long term, if they piss off the Senate, they can't get any funding, or they'll get their funding cut, or they'll get some other issues. Even the Imperator cannot pass laws. The Congress, the Senate, has to pass the law. The Imperator has to sign it. So this High Secretary works kind of as a secretary for the Imperator. Their job is to make sure that the interior runs well. And the Imperator has the last say on everything, but the Imperator doesn't deal with the day-to-day. We need more subcommittees. There's a subcommittee on artificial intelligence, which was referenced in the lore video, or in a lore bit, that I mentioned in a video that nobody watched. See the F-35 boondoggle or the Bradley ATV. Exactly. Those are civilian-run decisions, which were bloated wastes of money. I saw a video guy complaining about Star Citizen universe doesn't work because it's too much like ancient Rome, and that's not realistic for the future. All right, we're going to talk about that today. Specifically that one. Are there any special forces, special groups in UE forces like Delta Force or Marine First Recon IRL? Sushi, that's the Marines. The Marines are the special forces. The only special forces I can think of other than the Marines would be Squadron 42. Squadron 42 is the elite Navy fighter wing that are sent to do impossible jobs. Nice to meet you, Paul. You sound like a teacher, so you're a teacher, educator of some court? Yes, Pubba, I am a teacher. I am a high school social studies teacher. So, does it show? I guess the oversight is simply that they have to play nice with Congress if they want the money. If they go against the Congress and stuff, no money. So I guess it is kind of civilian oversight. It is, but it's not direct civilian oversight. They don't have to report everything to the secretary or to the Congress. The military simply has to ask for money through a budget. But the Congress doesn't really get a chance to say, like, you must do this or must make this weapons platform. The military has a lot of unilateral power to do what it wants. In fact, there was an issue recently in Star Citizen history, recently being a couple of years ago in the lore, where there was an audit of the military because the Congress was certain that the military was overspending. And that audit was very difficult to almost impossible because the military kept throwing up like, oh yeah, this person isn't available. I don't know what to tell you about. So is Squadron 99 just for show, like the Blue Angels? Or are they similar to Squadron 42? Squadron 999 is a test squadron. So their job is to test experimental vehicles that are being tested for the UEE. But they're also a show, a kind of like the Blue Angels. So they're combination test pilot and show force. Do they also eat crayons? If you have Marine in your title, crayon eating is probably what you do. Thank you, Owen. It's very similar to the U.S. government because it's my experience. But it's the High Secretary is where things get weird because the High Secretary is more of like a prime minister. They do a lot of the work that a president would do, but they're also part of the legislature. And they're in charge of a lot of executive power. So yellow's the best because banana. Oh, you said Test Squadron. I think it's a Junkencon. That's actually what the 999th was a reference to. It's a nod to the to actual Test Squadron. They even used the same colors the original design did, but they kind of pulled back on that. It's a nice little nod. Well, Kleischer is still bugged, so I guess I'll just chill here. Hey, Arwen. So that's the thing. So and the important part of the thing to I just mentioned is that citizens and civilians. The UEE is a federal democracy. In reality, they're more like a federal oligarchy because of the citizens branch. Citizens are a very small population of the population of humanity. Only a small amount of people are actually citizens because most people don't care. In the future of Star Citizen, in the United Empire of Earth, you either are anti-government. Well, there's many different branches. I don't want to simplify it that much, but if you're anti-government, you don't live in the UEE. There are plenty of places that do not have UEE affiliation. In fact, it's really freaking hard to get UEE affiliation. Most UEE planets are not represented in the Senate. For instance, none of the Stanton Systems planets are represented in the Senate at all. And the Senate is represented from planet to planet, not from system to system. In fact, there's not even system-wide governmental register like leaders. You don't have like the governor of the Stanton system. There is no governor of the Stanton system. There are governors who are part of states inside Stanton. So you might have the governor of Lordville or the governor of Hurston, but you wouldn't have a governor of the Stanton system. And it's not an elected position. It's not even an appointed position. The governors are elected locally by local civilians. They are the closest things that civilians have to a governmental branch. Yeah, Stanton is entirely commercially owned. Democracy in the classical Athens Greek sense. Exactly. So Star Citizen, that's what I was kind of trying to point out, is that that the UEE is a democracy in the sense that Athens was a democracy, in the sense that Rome was a democracy. And as I was pointing out with the civilians thing, because the majority of civilians either don't care, or if they do care, they're not involved in the government at all. They're off their own little worlds. Most of the matters are handled internally. The UEE is a very light in terms of its control because it doesn't need to control. Hence the militia mobilization initiative. The idea that the UEE wants to sell powerful military equipment to local militias as a ways of letting them control their own self-defense and police their own areas. The reason why the UEE exists essentially is for common defense. It is almost completely stripped down to its bare purpose. Its job is to stop humanity from dying and to regulate issues and disputes between various nations. That's it. When it was under the UNE, that was its goal. When it was under the UPE, that was its goal, to regulate humanity's expansion in the universe and to protect humanity as a whole. A common defense. It almost works like a confederacy because, and this is where it's going to sound weird, Star Citizen started out as a Wing Commander MMO. That's it. The UEE is a altered version of the Confederacy from Wing Commander. So, random thought. What if Xenothreat pushed into Stanton because Vanduul are pushing into Pyro, aka Virgil? We should help Xeno. They might be. We don't know. It sounds like a Joint Chiefs made into a singular position. Sort of my understanding is the position of rudimentary at best, though. Yeah, that's essentially it. Isn't CIG trying to put players into those categories, but making those places Squad 42 citizens and those who don't civilians? Exactly. Okay, yeah. The UEE is heavily influenced by Rome, but not sure how close it is to specific era, however. It's more close to the Byzantine Rome, to the split between East and West, towards the end of the Roman Empire than it is the beginning. There's that sweet, sweet lore, Papa Puff. Thank you. Imperial Rome. Yeah, it's Imperial Rome, but I call it a republic because it's still a representative democracy. It's still a representative republic. And because not everyone has the right to vote. So this is the kind of weird mess that the UEE is in. The UEE was created specifically by Ivar Mezer. Now, the purpose of the UEE was to try to unify the UPE into a more direct situation. Let's back up a little bit and talk about the Tavaran War. Again, there's a lot to cover. There's a lot of ground to cover. What I'm telling you are some very basic facts. There's a lot of history in Star Citizen. There's a lot of details, which are easy to miss if you're not paying attention. It's easy just to kind of gloss over the history as saying, this happened, some war happened, the dictator came in, they were overthrown, now we're here. In reality, there's a lot of other events and things. I haven't even talked about the ban on AI and why AI doesn't exist, or why the kind of technological level of humanity is stagnated for a while. So the First Tavaran War is big because it's the first interspecies war that humanity ever fought. And they weren't prepared. They got their asses handed to them by the Tavaran early on. And they almost entirely lost the war if it weren't for a charismatic leader by the name of Ivar Mezer, who was a captain in an EU infantry battalion that was invading, trying to liberate Idris IV from the Tavarans. His quick thinking and actions saved the invasion plan and helped liberate the planet. As such, he was promoted to colonel, and from there he was asked to lead the ground forces in the final invasion of the Tavaran homeworld, where he personally captured the Tavaran warlord and brought him before the Senate as a kind of a political gesture of ending the war. Because he did that, he was incredibly popular. So he was elected to the position of High General because it was an elected position. You still had to be a citizen to be elected to that position, but you didn't have to be an active member of the military. So, yeah. And as a member of the as a High General, he was advocating for the creation of the Prime Citizen. This is a unique role that would give him, or give the Prime Citizen, unique powers amongst all of the other triumvirates. To keep the triumvirate, the tribunal, the High Secretary, the High General, and the High Advocate still there, but to create a position above them so that they could have less bureaucratic mess and respond to threats more frequently. Because humanity had gotten its ass kicked by the Tavaran, thoroughly kicked. It had done some incredible amounts of damage to the infrastructure and to the psyches of humanity. They still won, and they're super proud about winning, but this wasn't the only war they realized they were going to have to fight. They also had the looming threat of the Xi'an, who were always standoffish and somewhat hostile to humanity. And it was after a series of bombing campaigns that happened, which were linked to the Xi'an, not to the Tevarin, the people began to promote Ira Mezer's idea, because Ira Mezer started to go around saying these issues would have been solved if I had been elected the prime citizen. And it doesn't even have to be me. If we had a prime citizen position, this could have been solved right now, instead of having to have the High Advocate investigate these systems and then report to the High Secretary and the High Command, because the High Command now, or the High General, because now the High General has to figure out how to coordinate to prevent future things from happening. This is a bureaucratic nightmare. We need a streamlined process because we are under active threat from the aliens, and we were not prepared for the last war that came out. We need to be prepared for the next war. Again, this is the hero of the Tevarin War. So eventually there was a vote to create the Prime Citizen. It was close, but there was a creation of the Prime Citizen. And Ivar Mezer won pretty handily. Again, close, but not like overwhelmingly, but he's still the majority. Again, I'm going to call back to citizens are the only ones who vote, and they're a small number, and they're all veterans, and most of them fought in the war. When you have a bunch of war veterans who are being told by the dude who literally saved their ass that the Xi'an are coming to eat your babies, the majority of them will probably believe that the Xi'an are coming to eat your babies. Because that's one of the things that happened at the end of the Tevarin War. A huge explosion of new citizens arrived, fresh from the war. They were veterans. They had to have more people, and because service means citizenship, they gained citizenship. So, what's the difference between the UE, Congress, and the Senate? They're the same thing. It's just CIG. CIG is weird on some of their nomenclature. They're essentially interchangeable. The official term is Congress, but they call it the Senate. So, I wonder if Paul has ever had dreams that he was set in the lore Star Citizen universe. No, thank God. Let's talk about the farming reforms in the mid-Mezer era. We could. We fucking could. We could talk about the rise of the Terra Mills from the First Tevarin War, and how Rytif became a huge place for industry and for food. And because it was abandoned during the Mezer era, it became a hotbed of anti-Mezer extremism. There's a lot of information here. What are the babies doing for me? It's crazy they've been toward the Xi'an, considering the rhetoric for a few hundred years. Question, was there ever been a multi-species military coalition against a common enemy? No, not that we know of. Closest is the Vanduul Wars with Tevarin and humans working together, but those Tevarin are actually part of the UEE. So what follows after the election of Ivan Mezer is a consolidation of power. Again, we're talking about a generation of veterans who trust the guy. And what happens immediately after the the election of Ivar Mezer as the Prime Citizen? He reformats the UPE into the UEE with him at the top as Imperator. Basically saying it's a position for life, and he gets to choose who gets to succeed him. That's the key. It's not inherited, it's choice. And over time, with, again, longer lifespans for humans in this time period, we only have 7 Mezers, but over time the Mezers get more and more corrupt. Now here's the thing. Again, who's in power? Citizens. Who are citizens? Veterans. Who are veterans? People who signed up to fight the aliens. Essentially, you have a group of people who believe they're right, who are more or less for the structure that exists and have a vested interest in keeping that structure active because they get power from it. Now, as the measures become more and more corrupted, the soldiers and veterans of the UEE start to see that they're starting to not fight for the common good of humanity, but fighting against their own kind, as rebel groups pop up all over the UAE, and in some cases are told to just mass slaughter civilians for no reason. So this begins to drop morale significantly as more and more people start to advocate against the measures. Things get worse and worse. Eventually, the measures are overthrown through a bloody revolution. Now, this only happened because the measures just essentially broke the camel's back. They just pushed over the last little bit until the people just couldn't take it anymore. This was not a popular revolution where everyone rose up and fought against the measures. This was a revolution of the citizens against the government. And again, citizenship is different from civilians. It took the citizens getting pissed at the government for the government to change, because they're the ones who are in charge. Now, why were the citizens pissed? The citizens were pissed because Ivor Messer and his descendants were mad, absolute mad with power, and doing terrible things even to citizens. Did they necessarily dislike the UEE or its structure? No, it worked. It does its job. However, they didn't want another Ivor Messer. So they wanted to implement, and they did implement, some reform to prevent the imperator from having unilateral power, giving Congress back a lot of its power to veto imperator dictates, and having rules in place for the High Command and the High Advocate to also ignore the laws or the orders of the imperator if they felt it was going against the law of the land, or if it was going against the Senate. They also instituted a term limit, so there is only an imperator can only serve for 10 years, and they can only serve for one 10-year term, not for life. But they still like the idea of having a powerful executive that could control what they need to. But it's a misnomer that they have total power. They don't. They simply have the button to push that can do anything. They're the ones who can propose war. They're the ones who can propose treaties. They're the ones who can propose tax breaks, but they still need to go through the Senate to get everything approved. Yes, Cade, that's what I'm talking about. Think Roman civil wars where dynasties changed. Exactly. Yeah. Is this a historical fact? And yet I doubt it will happen again. Bishop for Imperator. I see this. This is a historical fact. So how did Ivar legitimize having his child become the next imperator? Because he said so. Because he said they needed. We don't really know offhand, but knowing Ivor Messer, he probably said it's important that we ensure a continuous line of powerful people who know what's needed for humanity. My children are still my children. They will be prepared to fight for humanity. Specifically the Principate phase of the Roman Empire rather than the dominant phase. Exactly. So it has more to do with the fact that it works. And to use a modern example, why do Kim Jong-un, why is Kim Jong-un and Kim Jong-il, why were they in power? They were the sons of powerful men. Kim Il-sung became a powerful leader in North Korea. But one of the misnomers is that Kim Il-sung is a dictator. He was, but he was also a war hero. He was a rebel fighting against the Japanese invasion of Korea, and was incredibly popular in the North and the South. He was seen as a hero of the people. He also became mad with power later in his life and then passed the reins of power on to his son, who then passed his reins of power on to his son. It's not common, but it does happen. And historically speaking, it's complicated, but it does happen. And remember, who have the power in the UAE? The citizens. And if the citizens believe it's right, then they go. So, Now we're on to the current situation in the UEE. Let me pull up a map so we can actually have a little This is Star Citizen music, by the way. Let's go over this real quick. Where are you? Have a real teacher teach you fictional lore passionately. It's such a cool experience. I guess we invest in Star Citizen. Do I think Star COE will fail after the launch of Star Citizen? Always be at the edge of EOL. Yes, yes. It's designed to be failure. Right, like I said, the UEE is not the hero. It is the protagonist of the story. It is a flawed protagonist. The thing about the UEE is that it does offer humanity protection against outside forces. Without the structure of the UEE, many people would be in a much worse position, especially, probably the majority of humanity would be. And it would be much more difficult to deal with threats like the Vanduul, who represent a consistent outside threat, and recently discovered the Kurthok. So there's always some issue going on in the universe that says, hey, the UEE ain't perfect, but it's here. Now, in the aftermath of the Mezzer dynasty, there was an attempt to create a democratic state where you would abolish the citizenship system and move the capital to Terra, a true democracy. And it was incredibly toxically received. It nearly drove this new government into a civil war. Many of the old guard feared that if they radically changed, it would cause a economic depression. It would crash the economy. And to the bourgeoisie and to the middle class in the UEE, that was absolutely terrifying. Others felt that they needed to do it in order to throw off the old vestiges of empire. But again, we're talking about military members. The idea of an empire isn't too far off from what people in the military would find okay. It's strong, it's unified. That is very much the kind of aspect that the UEE is trying to exude. Oh yeah, 100%. But so essentially what happened was that movement to create what was called the Democratic Stellar Union was abolished. The Imperator Aaron Toy, who was the first imperator after the Mezzers, she just kind of said, you know what? This is going to destroy us all. Let's just have some minor changes to the government so that we can make this a little bit more democratic. I'm not going to fight two wars. I didn't just fight a revolution to then try to kill my common friends over this issue. Fight the battles you can win, essentially. And that's why we still have the imperator system. It's why we still have the system we have now, which is less than ideal. And again, the UEE is on the brink of collapse. It is at the end of a lifetime. It needs to be reformed or changed, but no one has incentive to change it. People like the way the things are. There is outside forces that are pushing in, like the Vanduul, which are slowly eroding at the UEE's unity. But there is also people who want to actively reform and change it, and those who have vested interest in keeping these things on their own. This is a universe in turmoil. This is a universe about to explode, and you are the one who decides the fate of this universe. That is the key of the lore. So, Will peace be possible between the Vanduul and humans? We don't know. Not while I'm playing the game. How does this planet get one or more seats in the Senate? You have to prove that you're worthwhile to the Empire. Let me go back to the essentially, you have to prove some sort of worth to the Empire. So the Senate has to approve your application. You have to apply for it. But if you're just like a pissant little colony in the middle of nowhere, lol, get good, son. But if you're a burgeoning manufacturing hub or trade hub, or your population is absolutely exploding with people, then the Empire will, you apply and the Empire goes, yeah, you're kind of good. Let's put you in there. Let me give you this for example. The Vega system has 3 planets which are fully populated. Only one of them has representation in the Senate, and it only came after the attack on Vega 2. Vega 2 is the only planet in the Vega system that has senatorial representation. Those planets are not unpopulated. They're huge. They have massive populations, large manufacturing hubs, but they themselves do not have senatorial representation. It took literally an invasion of the Vanduul for them to actually finally get recognized. So it's very difficult to get recognition. Short answer, don't be Magnus. Long answer, don't be a chicken man. So more population or industry determines more seats in the Senate, essentially. And it's up to the vote in the Senate. There's nothing written down in stone in terms of how many seats get what. Like, for instance, I think Terra has 5 seats, Earth has 7. But Terra and Earth are the 2 largest and most prestigious planets in the Empire. So. All right. The other thing that's important to talk about, which is AI. Now, here's the thing. AI in the Star Citizen universe. I'm going to make an entire video on this, but the very short answer about AI is that AI is bad. Humanity has built AI. They have built super sentient AI. And every time they build a super sentient AI, it goes crazy and kills everybody. Every single AI of super intelligence has gone crazy and killed everybody. From an AI that was built in Tokyo in the 21st century to regulate traffic patterns, causing mass death, to an AI built to help speed up the terraformation of Mars, which then caused the entire terraformation to go back on itself and kill everybody, to an AI running a generational starship, which then disappeared and has never been heard from again. AI has always led to terrible, terrible accidents or death. As a result, there is pretty much a blanket AI on AI research. Oh, the Mezzers fucked around with AI too. And when they fucked around with AI, they built a fleet of bombers that were built by AI, that was controlled by AI as a retaliation. So, for instance, if the Xi'an came over the border and just absolutely wiped out all the early warning systems, if these AI did not get the signal, that the continuous signal that was broadcast, they would then fly into Xi'an space and just start nuking planets. Here's the problem. They went crazy and almost started a war. So, like, AI have always been bad in the Star Citizen universe. So, as a result, there's only so much progress that can happen in terms of technology before you reach the point where you just need an AI. So, then how do you explain the hologram woman in New Babbage? She's not an AI, and she could be an AI. We don't know. Super sentient, like super AI. I think likely the woman in New Babbage is the AI woman. New Babbage is not an AI. She's more of a like a super AI. She's more of like a person. She has the average intelligence of a person, like your typical human being. And there is some AI that exists in the Star Citizen universe. The IFCS system in lore is an AI system, but it's built with a purpose, similar to AIs we have today, where it's built to do one thing really, really good. Is the generational ship different from the vessel we have seen? Then we have vessels seen? Yes. God, what is its name? The Artemis, I think is its name. The Artemis is a ship that there have been pieces found of it, but it disappeared hundreds of years ago, before humanity had even discovered jump points. Even if she was an AI, it'd probably be lower grade. No need to advance one to answer questions. Just might explain why her jokes are so bad. Yeah. Underpinning. If CIG had an underlying plan to destabilize the UEE, then Addison or Lestrange would be fitting lore-wise. Yeah. Yeah. The new Babbage AI is like an intelligent interaction unit. Yeah, it's generational in the sense that it would take many generations for it to go. It wasn't really a generational ship in the sense that it was like it would take many generations to go. I mean, I meant more generational in that everyone was frozen and they were sent in a direction. So it was more of a long distance colony ship that would take many generations back on Earth before it would arrive at its location, using the fastest quantum technology at the time. Yes, Addison. This time AI will be different. You didn't miss the stream. We're still going. So that's important. And I also want to address another concern. If you've noticed, and I will plug this. The Templin Institute is a fantastic group of lore folks. They do a lot of lore. They've been probably playing Star Citizen. I don't know if they're playing Star Citizen right now, but they do a lot of content for science fiction and fantasy universes that they explore. Their Stellaris Invictus system series is great. But one of the members, if not the lead member of the Templin Institute, has always had an axe to grind when it came to Star Citizen. Always had an issue with Star Citizen. I'm addressing some of those issues, but it just so happens that some of those issues that he brought up are issues which are important to understand if you're new to lore. The structure of the UEE, how it functions, the history of the UEE and how it functions, things like technology and AI, because these are at the core of the stories that are being told in Star Citizen. Going back to representatives, how much does Stanton have with each of its planets own? It doesn't have any. That's one of the deals that the companies that own Stanton made, was that they were allowed to control the Stanton planets, but those planets would never have representation in the Senate. So they have zero representation. As to population, I don't really know offhand. I wouldn't be surprised if it was hundreds of millions in places like ArcCorp, if not billions in places like ArcCorp, where it was only maybe several million in places like Hurston and Microtech and Crusader. So. No problem. That's, you see, all, like, for instance, the Artemis is a story that's left open for players to find. The eventual dissolution of the UEE and split off into the various factions, that's also for players to find. It's also really important to emphasize the UEE is not all of humanity. There are dozens of worlds, as I'm going to show you here, that exist inside human space. So the ARC star map has been around for a while. It's an award-winning star map, award-winning technology. It has all of the locations in the Star Citizen universe, and it even has jump tunnels, so you know all of the different systems that are connected. So Sol right here is where it started. Croshaw was the first system after that. Then I believe it was the Pharaon system, then Null, then Redder, then Idris, then Garen, then Davian, then Cathcart, and Cano, and Killian. These are all like systems that kind of expanded out. You see the blue dots are UEE systems. This dot, like the Callus system, this means developing, which means there's no UEE presence or minimal UEE presence. And these ones that are the little orange ones, these guys right here, they're unclaimed systems. So Pyro, as we know as Star Citizen players, has residents, people who live in Pyro. Xenothreat is the lead government in Pyro. They are not affiliated in any way with the UEE. Nyx is another place we know of because Levski, and Delamar, the planet that was removed from the game, that is where it's supposed to live. It's supposed to live in the Nyx system. And it itself has the People's Alliance of Levski, which is kind of like a communist government that exists outside of the UEE and is made up of rebels from people who dislike the UEE, who've been fighting the UEE since the Mezzers. So it wasn't the decision to stay the UEE was not a common one. Not everyone agreed with it, and many people left. Cathcart is a famous system that's filled with pirates. It's got the Spider, which is this floating platform of old hulks of ships, where kind of like a pirate nation exists. Then you've got Hades, which is a dead world. It's a graveyard of a species that blew themselves up millions of years ago. You've got Min, Tyrannus, Osiris, Tyrell, Genesis, Garen, Lear. Oh God, Lear. Lear's the home of a cult. The Outsiders, the Ortoni system, which is one of the few places where humans set up a colony, and then the jump point collapsed. The Null system, which is inhabited by a lot of outlaws. In fact, it's run by a pirate king who's Tavaran. You've got the Oberon system, the Tanga system, the Brannos system, which is where the largest Tavaran settlement outside of the UEE is. The Kellogg system. So you're like the Oso system. These are all systems which are not in the UEE, but humans live there and have settled there. So that is just kind of like the system. So you look through here, you have a chance to look through them. It'll give you a good idea of all the various systems. You can go 3D. You can also do it 2D, which is more flat, so it's easy to kind of navigate. All of the systems that are marked in red are Vanduul systems. Virgil, Tiber, Orion, Caliban, and Virgil. Or is there Virgil? Yeah, Virgil. And I think there's one over here. Is there not? No, there's not. These are all systems that used to be controlled by the UEE, not the Viking system, but these other systems were controlled by the UEE and then were conquered by the Vanduul. Then you also have these represent the Banu, the Yulin, the Bacchus system, Gideon, Geese, and then there's also one way the heck over here for some reason, which they've kind of hinted at meaning something, the tree system. This is actually like, I think it's kind of like the home world of the Banu, if I remember correctly. And then you have the green systems, or the Xi'an systems. Elise, Ryla, Kaifa, Pallas, Hadur, Indra. By the way, Pador is actually a joint UEE Xi'an world. Aquila, Tal, and then you also got Mirkal, Kabrai, Elsin, and even probably many more that we haven't seen yet. And you can see that there's even Vanduul systems which we don't have connections to. Various other systems, which I don't know how we know about them, but they exist. So, that gives you kind of an idea of the scope and the diversity of the Star Citizen universe. What's your take on the Ortoni? Do you think the jump point could be somewhere in the verse around the location of one of the Lacos systems? Probably. It'll probably show up again or reform. Would Stanton be governed by the planets that those companies are based on? Yes, but those companies own the planets, so they also own the government. Like I said, federal. They're a federation. They're a federal republic or a federal representative democracy, or federal oligarchy. Individual planets have incredible amounts of autonomy in the UEE. They only basically have to follow UEE common law, and that's about it. And UEE common law is some basic stuff like the Bill of Rights for every citizen and civilian in the UEE, and of course, like the requirements of not going against the UEE federal law, or UEE law. If those systems used to be UEE and the Vandal took them, this is the spoiler for Squadron 42 since we know they didn't take them. We know they didn't take them back. Well, I don't think Squadron 42 involves the retaking of systems. It may just be the defense, but we don't have a full idea of that yet. Soul to Terran back again. It's going to be a space struggle paradise, basically. Question: what do we know about the Ortani system that was cut off when it was jump point collapsed? I have to look it up a little bit, but the basic idea of the Ortani system was it was an experiment. It had, I think, 1 or 2 habitable worlds, and the idea was the company that owned or discovered the Ortani system, the Ortani company, I think is what they're called. They had an experiment where they would terraform the planet, but they would guarantee that anyone who worked for them to terraform the planet would get land on the planet. So the idea was to encourage these workers to come into this system and bring their families so that they could terraform the world that they were going to be building, which would then give them more of an incentive to really ensure that the world was doing well. And it worked. That system worked really well. They were way ahead of schedule. However, they were also cutting corners, and there was a lot of issues. There were a lot of conflicts on the stations where the families were living, because these families would literally have to live in essentially the stations we have right now as like the rest stops. They'd be living in those for 20, 30 years before they actually got to the planet. So if they had, you had a small child, they would be an adult by the time you would actually get access to land on the planet. Pretty rough existence for large groups of people. And there were issues of things like running out of food. They weren't giving enough rations and resources for people. So people were buying stuff on the black market, and it was incredible prices. And there's all this concern drove some bad press. So the leader of the company that was terraforming it brought in members of the colonization committees. I don't know if they were senators. They could have been. I think they were probably like just bureaucrats. But she invited them to come with her to Ortoni to inspect the system. And when she left with them to inspect the system, the jump point collapsed after they went through. The advocacy patrol sector is like a Lone Ranger, Texas Rangers. If I remember you correctly, my wish, a Star Citizen, a Squadron 42 spinoff where you play as the Advocacy Ranger in a game that plays like Red Dead Redemption on a cosmic scale. 100%. I'm 100% with you there. give me Red Dead Citizen. Hey, road comment. Modern day UEE. Do not kill people. Mazar area UNV. Try not to kill people. Since humanity has only been advanced civilization for a few hundred years, how do aliens really, we know, compare? Have there been any advanced civilizations for thousands of years? Really curious about this one. The only one that we know of that existed for thousands of years were the Hadesians, and they destroyed themselves. They wiped themselves out. The closest species that has, in terms of equivalent age or older than humanity, is the Xi'an. The Xi'an have been an interstellar spacefaring race since at least the 1500 AD. So a good 500 years before humanity even left our planet. They had an interstellar empire. So probably way back in the early BCs. I haven't done a lot of lore. Jail is a good person to know that. He has probably a little bit more of the insight in terms of specifics for that. And the Xi'an are as advanced, if not a little bit more advanced than we are. And the Xi'an almost killed themselves. Yes, they did. So if jump points can collapse, then isn't there a constant risk of supply lines being cut off and people being stranded in systems? Yes! There is a constant fear that jump points will collapse. In fact, after the second major jump point collapse happened, I can't remember exactly which system it was, people stopped settling in systems that only had one jump point. frontier new systems were completely slowed down. So that's another good example of how technology slows. Technology slowed down significantly because people weren't willing to take the risks and going out into the frontier. Jail again, yeah. Or Space Kung Fu Turtles. I love Space Kung Fu Turtles. There and back again, a trucker's tale. Does the writing team have full control over Star Citizen lore, or does Chris Roberts have final say there as well? Chris Roberts has final say on everything, but the lore team has a lot of control. The way that the lore team works, though, is that they don't dictate the game. The team will come up with an idea that they want to pitch as a gameplay aspect or a company. They'll bring in the lore team. The lore team will work with them and kind of like use their own kind of information, their own background, figure out some of the stories behind this. Then they will make it. A great example of this is the Javelin Wreck. The Javelin Wreck had no story. It was just a cool little Easter egg that you found in like 3.0. It still exists even today. However, in December, they wrote an entire backstory for that Javelin and why it's there. It's called the UEES Flysa, and it was there because the admiral in charge of the Stanton system screwed up big and managed to get it, with a series of unfortunate accidents, get it crashed onto the moon, which was one of the worst incidents in the 28th century, the 29th century. So, yeah, 29th century. Is there any estimate on Squadron 42? Haven't been up to date in a while. None yet. When it's done is the last estimate we got. But the reason why they came up with the UES Flysa is because they gave some of these tools to the team in. Thank you, by the way, Andy Dominic, for that 49 months with Prime. You rock as always. They gave some tools to the team in Canada, to the Montreal team, who is building out the ground, they're the new team that's in charge of all of the systems and the ground installations and such. And so they gave them the tools, and what they did is, as a practice for the tools, they built a landing zone out of the Javelin using resources they had at hand. And it was so cool and worked so well that the lore team was brought in to write an entire backstory as to how that Javelin got there. So, which means that, and they're going to add that Javelin Wreck, the Javelin Wreck landing zone into game. So that's an example of how building the game creates a cool thing. They bring in the lore and they kind of slot it into lore based off of what they have. Admittedly, 2 civilizations is a small sample size. Yeah. So you've got, you also have the Tavaran, but the Tavaran are about the same, if not a little bit behind. They're about the same as humanity. Humanity had a longer, like a larger jump in terms of quantum and jump technology. And then you have the Banu. And the Banu, we have no fucking clue how long the Banu have been around. And that's not like the lore team doesn't know what's going on. It's because the Banu don't have history. They don't keep records. Because if it's not valuable to the Banu, it doesn't matter. Like, that's one of the things about the alien species of Star Citizen is they're very interesting. They're complicated and very different from your typical alien fantasy race. They have a lot more nuance and a lot more thought put into them. For instance, the Banu don't have a gender. They're agendered. I don't even know if they have sex, like biological sex. They might be just giant sea sponges. I don't know. But they don't have gender words as a result. The Xi'an are a incredibly close-knit group of clan-based society. But because they're incredibly secretive, because it's all about how you can improve the clan, but also improve your own standing in the clan. So it's a lot of subterfuge and backstabbing going on in the Xi'an Empire. And then you have the Devarin, who were a warrior species that believed in the might and right, that completely lost everything and then were basically thrown to the winds and butchered by a dictatorial government, and now are only starting to get back some of their culture. So they're a lost species, a species that have lost their identity, that are trying to reclaim it. Asexual or very sexual? They're asexual in the sense that they don't have a biological sex. Banu like hot, sweaty commerce. Ooh, that's shiny. Woo, you know. Tev I'd put a tad behind, but they went in on a Japanese 1930s level building program that put them to the level of the UEE, if not a touch ahead in missile tech wise. Shield tech mostly, yeah. Red Fallout Citizen, yeah. Are the Vanduul similar to ants? Do they have a king or a queen? We don't know. They don't seem to have a king or a queen. They may have a leader, but like a unified leader. Think like a. By the way, I haven't said anything, but is my volume okay? Soft, too loud? Good. Okay. A little late to ask about that, but yeah, the Vandu don't really have a structure that we know of. They seem to have something like a war leader, like a central authority warrior caste. We don't know if they have worker castes or anything like that. They are focused around nomadic salvage. Their job is to, like, they exist by going to worlds, stripping those worlds bare, then moving on, and then waiting, generations or 2 generations or more. Like, for instance, the first system they attacked, which was the Orion system. The Orion system was discovered in like the early UPE days, like 2500s, and it wasn't invaded until the 2700s, which meant that at the very least, the Vanduul hadn't been around for 200 years, possibly longer. So they have these massive cycles upon which they move through systems, harvest everything they can, and move on. I've named 2 of my ships. One of my ships is named the Ryoma, which is my my Drake Corsair. And the other ship is called the King of Prussia. It's my MSR. It's called the King of Prussia. I think it's just called King of Prussia, but would the Banu's religious center be the best place to find out their actual history? Probably. They seem to very much value their religion over everything else. Commerce is important, but their religion is more important. It's sacred because it's religion, but it also informs all of their decisions. Hey, was Zylo's here? Hi, Zylo. We're talking about lore. Because there's a lot of interest in Star Citizen, I figured it'd be good to clear up some misconceptions about lore. I can't help but think the Klingons when I think the Vanduul. In reality, the Tevarin are probably more like the Klingons in Star Trek. The Tevarin believe in honorable combat, but they believe in unity. But they don't mind fighting alongside humans. The Vanduul have an honor code, but it's only an honor code amongst the Vanduul. They don't care about humanity. Their goal is to only look good to each other. They'll do anything they can to defeat humanity. They don't care. Their job is to win, nothing else. So, Carrick Viking Explorer and MSR Bolt Extreme. If they don't let me name my Cuddy Black Danger Tits, I'm gonna complain to Jan Dredge. 100% she'd support the name and fill the Cuddy with strippers. Yes, she would. I love all the Star Citizen story stuff, but I really wish it was more accessible. Not a fan of how they give us that info. So there's an interesting tidbit in the last monthly update from the lore team, which specifically says that they want to try to incorporate a lot more of this lore into the universe through radio broadcasts or like broadcasts at stations or through other means that are more diegetic in the game. And so they met with several members of the teams that deal with this kind of stuff. And the gameplay team sat around and said, listen, this is what it'll take to get those stuff done. We have to get all of these other things done before we can do that. So it's one of those things where CIG, even the CIG lore team knows they want to get that in there. They know that people want it, and they are with us that they want the lore in game. They want their stories to be told in game rather than on the website. But they're not there yet technically. So yeah, it's in the latest monthly update, which nobody reads. I feel like I'm the only person who reads that sometimes. Yeah, I think just having wild lines from random NPCs on the ground and having like radio chatter from various AI ships flying around would be cool too. They're good to read. There's a lot of good, juicy information there. Thanks for clearing that up. Watch the Vanduul are the pit bulls. The real Vanduul will be refined, high-tech race that doesn't want to get their hands dirty. Maybe. I would love it to be something similar to podcasts that I could tune into while I'm mining or running cargo. Even just kind of stuff that would be on loop would be nice. Hey, Paul, if you had 2 bullets and you could shoot ship names or Adolf Hitler, what would you kill and why? Why would it be ship names twice? I like ship names. I am probably one of the few people who was irrationally happy that ship names was coming in. I'm not going to talk about the ship names controversy because I've already said my piece. It's beating a dead horse at this point. Either it'll change or it won't. I want to be excited about things again. So the Star Citizen History Channel radio will be stories about space Nazis. Yes, it'll be 24/7 Mezzer channel. Nothing but the Mezzers. Something that Elite does so well is to be perfect to having an NPR station that updates every week. Yeah. This may not be related to lore, but proximity chat was working extremely well today, and was able to talk to others in Stanton and station, and worked with others through in-game comms, and led some of the best gameplay I've ever experienced. Why isn't CIG focusing on improving VoIP? The reason why is because a lot of VoIP has to go through the back end. So I'm sure VoIP uses a lot of resources, and in order for that to function better, they probably need to have some better interfaces and better move a lot of the information, basically make server performance better. Because VoIP is one of those things where when it works, great, it works, but it often doesn't work, and a lot of those reasons have to do with other things that they have to go in and fix. And while it'd be great to do that, more people would prefer them fixing or building out systems that we want to use than just VoIP. VoIP is cool, but VoIP is pointless when you can only have 40 people or a handful of people. But I agree. Some of the best experiences I've ever had was when VoIP was active. I know there's short stories in Jump Point. Think they'll have some sci-fi authors kick out some novels? There was supposed to be a Star Citizen novella that was written. It was one of the things you could back for early on in the game. So maybe. VoIP is really hard on frames. I don't know if it is or not. It might be. It's not necessarily, it sounds weird, but it might be taxing on the server because it's a lot of information that's being processed. Just like I don't let it come in IRL channel, history channel, because they're all like, we're the Masons aliens? Let's ask Jesus, the World War II vet. I hate ancient aliens. As a historian, it's offensive. Oh, so offensive. Even just being able to listen to the off-brand 9-inch nails they listen to in Dumper's Depot would be nice. Makes the 325 sound system do something. Yeah. UE native Carrick, UES Tempestus, MSR UES Revenant. Yeah, that's good. The horse has been killed several times by now. Yeah. All right, let's go into the other thing that we're going to talk about specifically, which was the iCache. The return of iCache. So, there was a statement made by Mark Abent, and I'm going to play the clip here because it was brought to my attention from Super Mac Bros. Oh, before that, I'll finish this up. Again, I said watch the Templin Institute. I don't want you, don't go propagating them, don't go harassing them. There's no point in doing so. They're bringing more attention to the game. There's no reason to attack them, even if they don't like the lore. And they even said, he was the guy who was responsible for that even said, hey, it's just my opinion. If you want to change my opinion, feel free to. But this is my opinion right now. Here we go. I'll put this link in chat as well for you.
And other things that will make formation flying worthwhile, so bleeding numbers if you can fly together in sync. It also does sound as though when you activate your missiles in your ship, you will emit increased signatures, which could be part of this missile operator mode and a way of balancing the missile boats so other ships know when a missile boat has activated their missile system, and then they should be more aware of that. They are currently implementing the signatures and detection tech now, and they will do a balance pass to ensure that everything is emitting the appropriate signatures. They will also need the UI, again, to allow players to know exactly what is going on and when it's happening. But something that Mark Abent mentioned was a big change is now making it all data driven, which means design now has the ability to actually make things like scanners capable of finding specific things like items for medical purposes or cargo purposes, as well as being able to create and expand the upgrade paths for scanners. And with Mark mentioning this framework is now finished and with gameplay design, which allows them to open up this gameplay, my techie friend actually pointed out to me that what this means and what Mark is saying here is regarding the iCache work. Mark is stating that the iCache is working and the conversion is done. Now it's all just about making the gameplay, which is super exciting to hear, as now those floodgates can open. So thank you.
So, yeah. So little things that I missed that someone else pointed out to me that was pointed out to Mac is that, and you should be watching Super Mac Bros anyways. He's a fantastic content creator. He does a lot of updates like this. He's been on the Captain's Table. He's a friend of mine. Good dude. But yeah, that's a cool point. Is that what Mark has said essentially means that like iCache in terms of the back end is finished. So now it's a matter of taking the tools that they developed and put them into use. So yeah. This doesn't necessarily mean that next patch we'll start to see a flood of new content, but it means that similar to what we've seen in the past with SOCS, OCS, and other systems, the back end is done. Now the key is to make sure that the back end is working with the front end. So what does iCache being done mean though? What will I notice with the game when the iCache is in game? When iCache and persistent streaming is fully in game, it should eliminate 30K. So instead of you crashing and having the crash be when you're hauling a cargo of laranite and you crash and you just start swearing up and down that you lost everything, you will be able to reconnect to a new server with your persistent state saved. So whatever was in your ship will remain in your ship, and wherever you were last at will be where you are at, thus making 30Ks less painful. It should also do things like improve performance. Not intended to, but it probably will, by moving a lot of the information off of the simulation servers or off of the gameplay servers into back-end servers where it can store information. So it's called persistent streaming, but iCache is probably the biggest poster child for it. Allows for longer-term persistence, allows for inventory management, which is one of the reasons why we see personal inventory coming in 3.14. So what about things like my helmet's taking 3 minutes to apply? Is that an iCache related? It could be. It's server related for sure. And one of the goals of iCache, or one of the things that iCache might do, is by moving a lot of that information, that back end process, like how much, because the server has to keep all of this information in memory, so it can feed it back into all of these what are the entities? All these entities into memory. At a certain point, it just eventually crashes because it has to keep all this information in there. So removing any of that entities away from the gameplay into a back-end service where it just kind of logs all the information and then just has to bring out that information when it needs it should improve it takes me 3 minutes to get my helmet on. So delays writing and reading to a server. Who is this? Eliminate 30K? Who is this iCache and how do I join its religion? It won't eliminate 30K. It'll just make 30Ks less painful. All that a 30K is a disconnect from the server. That's all it is. It's an error code where the server stopped communicating with the client. That's all that is. It'll still happen, but instead of you going, God damn it, and taking your keyboard and smashing the wall and screaming to the top of your lungs because you lost your last UEC of laranite, now you see a 30K and you go, damn it. Log out, log back in. Oh, yep, there I am. I'm 30 seconds back where I was before. Time to boot up my drive and get to where we're going. So. Question. Did they say that explicitly about 30Ks? That's a godsend. And they didn't explicitly say that it will fix 30Ks their first implementation. But that is a side effect of it. Because let me put it this way. If a server is tracking where a coffee mug is in the universe, Chris Roberts likes to use his little coffee mug words where he says, if I take a coffee mug and I put it in the forest and I fly away, when I come back, that coffee mug should still be there if no one's come by and picked it up. So using that idea of that's what iCache is, that's what persistence is in Star Citizen, then knowing where that coffee cup is at all times means that your ships should be stored in some way in terms of their positions at some point. It depends on the refresh rate of when that information is stored on the iCache servers. So that could be a couple of seconds, a couple of minutes, so on and so forth. But it should happen because when the game goes into full server joined, like server meshed mode, you're going to need that if a logout happens. Because if you just log out, it makes no sense for your ship to be completely lost because you logged out. When can we see the iCache come into the field? We don't know. It's not on the roadmap specifically, and they specifically don't want to put any tech on roadmap and put any dates by it. But based off of things like what Mark A. been saying, what other people were saying, and if you look at the deliverables, like things like personal inventory, which require iCache to work, at least the first implementation could be coming in as soon as June, if not by the end of the year for sure. It's called persistent streaming. I know, but they specifically have been mentioning iCache more and more. So iCache is dead. Long live iCache and persistent streaming. Once CIG thinks 30Ks are fixed, we will see a commemorative mug for sale on that store. Please, can we get 30Ks? 30K mugs? When iCache is implemented, do you believe other features of the game will be able to be implemented more quickly? Yes, but I would hesitate to say that Star Citizen is going to increase development simply because it's done. I don't think that CIG will slow down any more than they have once those are in, and I believe they will eventually speed up. But quickly start implementing things. Quickly is subjective. For instance, quickly could mean in a patch. It could also mean in a year. Because everything that CIG does has to be prototyped, it has to be tested, it has to be implemented, and then it has to be tested again, and then it has to be brought fully into the game and tested again. Then it has to be sent out to the Evocati during the patch and tested then, and then released. That process can take anywhere from 3 to 6 months, if not longer, depending on the prototype and the white box and the gray box phase. And depends, all of those things rely on individuals in CIG, teams, managers, executives, all to look at it and sign it off to make sure it meets the standards that they need to. This is a long process and can involve multiple teams over multiple months. A good example of this is iCache, persistent streaming, and server meshing. All three of those things have been in the pipelines since 2014. They have been around since almost the beginning of this project. But they needed things like 64-bit conversion for the entire game system to run on 64-bit floating precision, rather than the old 32-bit system that was in the original Crysis engine, CryEngine. Then they needed to implement the universe and planet landing, which took a lot of effort and resources. Once they did that, they needed to implement object container streaming that allows for these for objects to become objects, these become containers inside the universe. Then they needed to move that from just the client side to the server side, so the server could treat it as its own container, essentially allowing you to create a region of space in the Star Citizen map that would be its own container, its own server. Meaning you could scale it up to the size of systems and all the way down to the size of ships. In theory, with OCS, you can make a ship its own server with server meshing. But you need that ability in order for server meshing to work. Then they needed persistent streaming, because persistent streaming will save all of the information off of the gameplay server into a backend server that they can then regulate and have more control over. And convert the current inventory system away from its current XML format into something else. And they may still be using XML, but they're converting it to something else. Then once all of that is there, you can implement server meshing, which allows for you to stream in and out information seamlessly across servers and take a system like Stanton and turn it into multiple servers, which will allow for multiple players to be involved in one area. Because right now, with one server being the entire Stanton system, that server has to handle all of the entities of the Stanton system. Instead, if all of Lorville was its own server, it would run much better, because there's far few entities in Lorville than there is in the entire system, thus improving performance and allowing for more players to get into the game. So that's a long way of saying it will speed it up, but speed is relative. Unrelated question, will the Pirate Gladius and Pirate Caterpillar be available to buy in game? If so, will they be implemented as livery? I have no idea. I assume so. Question, does the UE implement their logistics chains? How does the logistics chains? They're very spread out in most systems. It seems like they have a decent amount of local supply. A lot of reliance on local freelance haulers, and think people like the Rust Society. Well, they don't take government contracts anymore. But they have a merchant navy that does a lot of work for them. Griffin Gaming, thank you so much for those 2 tier 1 subs, gift subs. Question, why do you think all of the important stuff keeps getting pushed further and further away in the roadmap? and we keep getting just beautiful, unimportant stuff released in the PU. I don't know what you're talking about. The answer is why things get moved is because the backend servers don't work yet. They're the backend stuff, the iCache, that sort of thing. We haven't gotten almost no new missions or gameplay loops in an extremely long time. Because things like... So, let me put it this way. Imagine how many objects, things, exist in Lorville alone. Then imagine how many there are in ArcCorp Area 18 alone. Imagine how many objects that have to be rendered in 3D, all those sorts of things, on a moon. Imagine that entire system of Stanton has all of those objects in them. The reason why they don't do new missions or new gameplay is because those new missions and gameplay will add new objects, new entities into the verse. And it's already maxed out with entities. The game is too full. It seems like it's empty, but it's filled with lots of detail. And that detail is expensive to run. So until they can have a handle on things like iCache and server meshing, a lot of stuff is going to be left behind until they can get that tech up and running. So if they think they can get this tech up and running, they'll schedule for that tech to be, or for that gameplay stuff to be added to the universe around that time. If that tech slips or has some issues or takes longer than they think, then that gameplay that they're working on doesn't make any sense. There's no point in putting it in. So it will slip further and further. That's essentially it. Until those two things are in game, a lot of gameplay is just stuck because they could put it in, but it would be broken or it would be ad hoc, and it'd be taking more effort to put it in than it would be worth to update and such. So. Hopefully the side effects takes the loads off the servers so we can get better desync wise. Exactly, that too. Thank you, Griffin, again. Yeah. Question, do you think we will see an iteration of iCache this year? Yes. Certain stuff just can't be finished until certain backend comes online. I think that's why we won't see salvage until physicalized damage is done either. We're getting salvage in the end of this year. At least so far. Do you think we will be able to hunt space whales? Yes, eventually. Comment. It would be great to be able to stream YouTube videos on monitors or MFDs in your ship to deal with long-term quantum travel times. That'd be a good idea, but I think CIG would probably do better to implement more inverse entertainment that might also benefit the player. So market watch, security reports, other things like that. And then, of course, they'll also be implementing maintenance. So you have to go through and make sure that your ship is at tip-top order. Make sure that the power nodes are functioning properly. Ensure that there's no leakage or breaks in some places. So I'm really happy to see more on the Rust Society. They're my core inspiration. There's not a lot of information on them except for what I've had. I'm doing a video on them, but it's essentially taking what lore there is about them and then combining it with my own knowledge and my own background. So this is all Star Citizen music. Thank you, Griffin. I was looking at the telemetry data the other day. Some of it is all the way back to 3.7. On average, loading times doubled or tripled per user rather than going down due to all the new assets that have been added and put into the game since. Yes, and FPS is going down as well because of those new assets. For the size of Pyro, do you think they will try to get some more ships that can carry light fighters since they might need to be carried? Possible capital ships or maybe some unannounced smaller carrier type ship? I wouldn't be surprised. I wouldn't be surprised if we don't get Pyro. By the time we start getting Pyro, we will be into Squadron 42 territory. I know we haven't gotten a lot of updates, and I know CIG has said that Squadron 42 will be done when Squadron 42 is done, but I would be surprised if Squadron 42, we don't hear anything by the end of this year on Squadron 42 in terms of release sometime in 2022. I've been thinking like, yeah, 2021 may be the end of the year, but more likely the end of the year 2022. Chris Roberts himself has said that if they are going to release it, they'll do a 6-month lead up of publicity. So we'll know 6 months ahead of time. So if CIG plans on doing any kind of announcement about Squadron 42 towards the end of this year, then I would expect it to release sometime in July. If they do some sort of announcement at, say, E3, which they've done before, then I would expect to release it to be released sometime at the end of the year, end of next year. So, yeah, best indicator for Squadron 42 is the monthly report in correlation with the progress tracker. That's the best way of doing it, yeah. Maintaining a single seat fighters would mean implementation of pre-flight checks then? Yes. Going through, looking around, walking around the ship, testing components, ensuring that they're working, getting your ship and flying off. Small single-seater ships are not designed for multi-system travel or long-distance travel. They're designed for carrier operations or inter-system work. A Hornet can jump multiple systems. It's just not designed to. That's why the Vanguard exists. And if you look at the Vanguard is huge. It's not a single-seater ship. Everything for Squadron 42 is on the progress tracker is essentially polished or gold standard. How can that be true even when we have the PU to play and the PU is far from finished? Because there's a difference between... so the PU has a lot of features that Squadron 42 doesn't need. And if there's a lot of polish and gold features, it means that they're essentially done with the content of Squadron 42, but content is not game. Having ships and guns and areas to shoot them in is not a game. Having stories and missions and objectives and AI spawn locations and various implementations of gameplay, that's a game. And that is as much of a work in the game as it's as just making the stuff for it. And sometimes games can take months, if not years, to get that right, to really nail down the balance between gameplay and story and all those other things. So, and we do know that Squadron 42 is consistently getting play tested. In the last update for Squadron 42, they talked about how they've been doing regular play tests of Squadron 42 to get kind of flow of mission design, of character stuff. One of the things that I see a lot of people complain about is like people say like, oh, well, Xylo said that Squadron 42 was playable from beginning to end in 2014. Was that still true? It's like, yeah, it probably was. Squadron 42 fundamentally changed when they added planets. Like, there was no planet missions until planets existed, and now suddenly there are planet missions. So they had to build whole new missions and levels from scratch. So the game that we were going to get in 2014 or 2016 or whatever is not going to be the same game we're going to get in whenever it releases, simply because of that fact. It also means that the scale and scope of the game has increased, which may mean better. It definitely means different. They reshoot scenes from for Immersion Squadron 42. You don't do that if it's almost done. I mean, citation needed. That's one of those things that's very late stage as well. You can work with animatics and placeholder graphics for a long time. Reshooting scenes for immersion has to do with cutscenes, not necessarily gameplay. Kotaku tells you a lot of things there, Francisco. What if CIG can't get server meshing to work with? Will people settle on loading screen for different system? I think it's a false dichotomy. I've heard that question a lot. Like, what if this doesn't work? Then CIG will come up with something else. But the thing about server meshing is that server meshing will work. The issue isn't will it work. The issue is will it do what CIG wants it to do? And that's more of a question that I can't answer, but that's probably the better question to ask. Because server meshing is not new tech. Nothing in Star Citizen is new. Nothing is new under the sun. All of the stuff you see in Star Citizen is stuff that's been done in other games, sometimes better in other games. The thing that makes Star Citizen and Squadron 42 unique is not that they're unique entirely, it's that they take a lot of ideas which are not unique and throw them together to make a unique game. A massive open world universe with thousands of players connecting together, affecting an economy, but scaled down to an individual person's level and scaling up to massive capital ships with an interactive story, emerging gameplay, as well as events, dynamic events generated by player actions. All of these ideas have existed in games and have been done in games before. In Star Citizen, they're all being brought together into one package, and that's fucking hard. It requires a lot of research and development and figuring out how to get things that don't want to work together. So, and networked. Networked and synced is the hardest. Yeah. Making something work in a single player local is infinitely easier than making it work in a multiplayer environment and run on a server whose tech is incomplete. Yes. The only thing that's related between the PU and Squadron 42 are assets and some of the background tech. But to give you an example, the fact that Star Citizen runs like garbage isn't really a issue for Squadron 42, because the reason why Star Citizen runs like garbage is because there are 50 players in a server, all being related to a single server. In Squadron 42, you were one player in one server. The game will actually spin up a server for your player, but it'll also spin up a game instance, which is your player. But you're not playing it online. Essentially, the game is creating a local server on your machine and then putting your player in that local server. So it uses the same tech as Star Citizen, but it doesn't need all of the tech of Star Citizen. It doesn't necessarily need iCache or server meshing. They might implement those if they think they have time and they think they'll improve the experience, but those aren't required. If anyone who's played Star Citizen when they're the first person on the server will know things move a lot quicker. Things are a lot better when you're just the only person on the server. The more the players scale, the more the problems happen, and a lot of those problems come from the fact that there are multiple players. This is going to sound weird as well, but have you ever guys played Star Marine recently? Lol, there's a lot more problems with the FPS than just server desync. Have you seen the roadmap recently and seen all of the work in FPS that they're doing this year? It's a lot easier to rework FPS than it is to work back-end server tech. There's like 50 people in the world who have the knowledge to build something like what CIG needs in the back end. There are a lot of people who have made first-person shooter games. They're kind of ubiquitous in the gaming industry. Been a lot of people who make first-person shooter games. So, and there's a lot of assets and there's a lot of practice. So it's a lot easier to tune that up. But there's no point in tuning it up if there's not a lot of purpose for it, or if it's hard to tell the difference between issues with desync or other issues and the actual gameplay. I joined a new server a few months ago and only 4 other people at 2 a.m. Went and did a bunker mission, and I've seen experienced Arma players do worse than those AI. They kind of got the Arma AI thing where I've got an AK-47 and I'm 1,000 meters away. I'm going to headshot you. That kind of Arma AI style. So. Well, is there any relevance to tiers? I saw some of the player movement changes, but they're listed as tier 1. Some of them listed as tier 1. Tier 0 is the very basic implementation. Tier 1 is the first implementation. In terms of quality of player/character models, they use tier 0 to refer to top quality. No, tier 0 is the interim implementation quality. Just because confusion in departments. Yeah, their departments aren't consistent in terms of tiers. Oh, yeah. You're talking about like So here's an even more confusing thing, Cade. Characters, the tier 0, tier 1, that's gone. That doesn't exist anymore. Everything is the same. Because they developed brand new facial tech to make it work like that. So the new character development is the same tech that's being used for hero characters versus NPCs versus generic. They're all the same tech because they developed brand new tech for it, which they showed off in 2018 CitizenCon. So they've done away with the tiers. So like even that system's gone. So. Hey, Akira. The AI will also vault over walls and rush you when you're pinned down. Also saw them take cover when I managed to pop out and return fire, killing one of them. Yeah. Yeah, I know what you're talking about, Cade. We're talking about the tier 0, which is the hero implementation, versus tier 1, which is kind of supporting character, and then tiers 2 and tier 3s. Tier 2s being kind of like you got a voice somewhere, and then tier 3 is like generic AI goon coming to kill you. Or random person walking on the side of the road. So yeah, that entire system's gone. As far as I know, that died in 2018. It's the menu song. It's called Lear 3. Lear 3 by Pedro Camacho. Akira, we're always dressed up fancy here. Welcome to the Astropub, the classiest pub this side of the galaxy. We talk lore, we talk gameplay, we talk alcohol. We do all sorts of cool things here at the Astropub. Because Lear 3 is very gentle and welcoming. It's also a death trap. It's Australia. It's space Australia. Uptime. I've been up for about 2 hours. 2 hours and 10 minutes. Question. So are we getting those push trolleys for cargo on the next patch? And if so, will it only be used for delivery missions? I don't know if it's in the next one. I think it might be because I think push-pull is in there. And so yeah, it will be used for missions. I don't know what it'll be used for. I think it's a prop for you to use what you like. Can we expect medical to come into place for specified missions for medical? As if you look at the roadmap and based off of the last ISC, there's definitely some gameplay dealing with dealing with medical gameplay that's coming in soon. They're still working on hospitals, so I wouldn't expect it like next patch, but maybe by September, by the end of the year, sort of thing. Menu song by Pedro Camacho. Okay. That's what on the YouTube that I have it on, it's called Lear 3. The one that I was just doing was Malta Planet, Majesty of Leitmoff. Subscribers will get orange and blue push trolleys. You heard it here, CIG exclusive. Nighthawk sale. No, how's it going, Nighthawk? I love how you use the caption quarters of the Carrack as your green screen. I do. This is actually from Haskaha. Let me put it. I use a lot of his stuff for like my titles and stuff like that. Even the title of this video on YouTube is Haskaha video. It's fantastic. You should be checking them out. Please let us get great cat PTVs with tow hatches for grab sleds. A lot of people want it. A lot of people want that. Hype for the new delivery type missions. I'm interested in seeing what those are like. I feel like they're going to be something like what they developed for Xeno Threat, but then kind of ported into missions. So once CIC enters beta, do you think we'll see more feasible for them to give a release date? Once Star Citizen enters beta, I wouldn't expect them to give the release date. I expect them to release it. I have a feeling that when Star Citizen enters beta, we will have essentially a soft launch. where the game is done and they're going to stop wiping the game for whatever reason, for any reason, but they're not going to call it released because they haven't released all of the planets that they wanted to, or the systems they wanted to in the game. And once they get all of the systems in, they'll have a release, but the game will still be worked on for those kind of things. Thank you so much, Templin Institute. How do I Star Citizen? Well, first, you take your head and you pull it out of your butt. Thank you for that Canadian. That Canadian. Thank you, Canadian. As I said earlier, supporting Templin and there we go. Okay. I don't know if you're actually here or if you just drop by to do that. Bring Templin to the captain's table. Templin's fully willing. I don't know if you can still hear me or anything like that, but I'll say this: watch the video, have comments on your take. I think a lot of your take is taken from old information and based off of a lot of your frustrations comes specifically from the fact that the game isn't finished yet, and there's a lot of stuff that's changed over time. Not saying you're not entitled to your opinion that you don't like the Star Citizen lore. Just one of those things that I do. That is what I do with Star Citizen lore. I've been with this project for a long time, so there's a lot of information, and it's kind of like a jigsaw puzzle. There's a ton of information. It's difficult to synthesize, and CIG does a terrible job of synthesizing it. But I'm a historian, is my day job, so a lot of it is the fun part of putting together and figuring some stuff out. Tempest was all right, but the second one, yeah. Question: hello. If CIG is teasing with ground vehicle physics, does that mean that the planet ship physics will be on hold? What do you mean, Vulture? Thank you, Tony. Yeah, I had some weird issues with my stream as well. I think it's back to this one, but I will say this: I don't know if you can relay this message, Tony, to Templin. If you want to know more, I'm always willing to talk. I do Star Citizen lore is kind of my content, so I'm always willing to clear up any misconceptions. I know they're busy. Templin's got a lot of other stuff that they do on a weekly basis, and on a monthly basis, and content is content. So I hope to change the mind, but we'll see. Why can't fiction just be fiction? We don't need these people to always critiquing on how not realistic the universe doesn't work. I get the opinion side of things about how the opinionated it is. And that's individual stuff. That's an individual issues. At the same time, I feel some people feel like it needs to be right. Like if they don't like something, they want it to be, or for a reason, for a legitimate reason. So, question: should Pico run for Imperator in 2960? Yes, I'm running for Imperator in 2960. Jake, vote for me in 2960. It's going to be 9 years from now, and we'll all be dead because of the heat death of the universe. But I'll be running for Imperator in 2960. In this case, realistic is one of the reasons Star Citizen exists. It's supposed to be a well-crafted universe, so Temple Institute has a point. It's an alpha, and it's time for constructive criticism. Yes. Question. So you know a lot about Star Citizen's lore. So if you yourself were integrated into the lore, how would you want to see yourself in the verse? I wouldn't. I don't want to play it. You have my vote. UE is realistic. Ton of your videos are on 40K. I don't know. Listen. 40K is a huge freaking universe. It is, and it makes no goddamn sense, but it fucking gets clicks. And it's interesting. It's weird. It's bonkers. It doesn't pretend to be realistic. It has space magic and giant gorillas with 40 millimeter grenade launcher guns. More DACA. Yeah. Question, being the lore man that you are, do you have any insight into what science gameplay might possibly be? Hey, Stat, how's it going, buddy? Yeah, the one thing that I think, I'll go over that here in a second, Premio. But the one thing that that Templin brought up with Star Citizen, which makes sense, is the document on the government is old. We're talking beginning of the project old. And a lot of stuff has changed, but the lore team hasn't gone back and retrofitted what they've changed with. For instance, just as an idea, the current Imperator, Addison, was elected in 2950. But the previous Imperator, blanking on his name, I'm gonna have to look this up because I went bad. Kalos Costigan. There we go. Kalos Costigan, Emperor Costigan. In the original Star Citizen lore, Costigan took office in like 2935 or 38. But then they realized that Costigan, that would have put Costigan at the Imperator for over 10 years, which breaks their own canon. So they had to go back and retcon it to say that he was elected in 2940, but he had run previously in 2930 and lost. And so he ran again in 2940. So there's a lot of like these like consistent shifting elements of the lore because it's still in development. There's some things like the Stanton system's founding date was pushed way back because they realized that the time period between the beginning of the Stanton system and the end of the Stanton system was different. So even the lore is an alpha. There's some basic foundations, but there's a lot of other sorts of things. Yeah, Titus Costigan. Titus is different. Titus is his son. Hey, Knowledge, thank you. Weren't they improving the ship physics in atmosphere after all the changes made in space, or is that already in the game? It's already in the game. That was made recently. So question, being a lore man that you are, do you have any insight into what science gameplay might possibly be? Yes. So, mapping. So, you go to an area that hasn't been mapped in a while. The ICC Stellar Surveyors say, map this region. Why? Because we need to update our maps. We have no idea what the fuck's out there. So you go there and you use your scanners, you scan a little area, go you scan the area, go through, and you take that information, you go back to the ICC Self-Raiders and give it to them. That's more exploration. And with science, what you do is you go down to a planet, you'll find a specimen, take it back, analyze the specimen, see how it works, those sorts of things. It's going to be a lot of like box missions are today, but more in depth in terms of find this X thing, bring X thing back to a location, or analyze X thing and bring that information back to us. I wish we had a new Imperator. Do you believe we'll ever see an era of the UE similar to the Empire in Star Wars? Yeah, we did. It's called the Messer era. Probably not, though. Bring out the machine gun that goes ping. Yeah, the machine goes ping. Yeah. I like the prospect of exploration in science being a form of mining through scanning in certain types of things and places. Yeah. Sounds like science and exploration are going to be going hand in hand. They probably will. Perhaps in a single-player campaign during the Messer era? No, but they'll probably do something like Theaters of War, because Theaters of War takes elements in the lore from the past, and you kind of replay history. So that might happen, but... Okay, I'm gonna be quite honest. I didn't expect Templin Institute to actually show up. I've been antagonizing Templin for like all day. Question: how's your day? Everyone asks you questions about the game and everybody itself. I've had better. My arm doesn't hurt anymore. I got the first round of my COVID shot a couple of days ago. And I was teaching classes today about a topic I really enjoy, which is markets. So we're talking about markets and the beginnings of supply and demand. But my room, its AC is broken in my room, and they're dealing with a lot of bureaucratic stuff right now just because it's coming towards the end of the year. And so admin is like, we need to make sure these people pass. And I'm like, I know, I've been trying to get them to pass. So that kind of stuff. For those of you guys who don't know, I'm a history teacher. That's my day job. I teach social studies, grade 9 through grade 12. So all of high school. I teach economics, world history, U.S. history, government, so on and so forth. So nice to see you on the yacht club again. I'd like to come on the yacht club at some point. I have to schedule with them because they usually schedule a month ahead of time. So probably some towards the end of the year. Any updates on the gossip about Squadron 42 DLCs? Nothing yet. You make where I work days fly by. Download it and listen all the history vids when you got. Thank you, man. How to exit Star Citizen and get a refund? I don't know. You're in the wrong stream there, buddy. Question: are you excited to stream Pirates and Sailors? Yes, I am. I was like, what are you talking about? Yes, I am. I'm excited to do some roleplay for it's Dark Tide? No, it's Dark Side RP. I'm interested in doing something other than Star Citizen for once. I love this game. I like playing it, but holy fuck do I want some other things to do. New to this channel, are you planning to write a Star Citizen novel? No, not really. I'd have to contact CIG anyways for that if I wanted the rights. I just know a lot about the game. Essentially, the best way to understand who I am, my name's Paul, Berserker01, Batman Shelley. I have run this stream, the Astropub, for a long time, and I've always been interested in the stories behind Star Citizen, and at a certain point a couple years ago, I realized that no one was talking about the lore of Star Citizen, and those who were talking about the lore of Star Citizen were doing the broad scope, very general lore. And I always like the lore because a lot of the stuff of Star Citizen is broken up into its various parts. So you can study the Aegis Dynamics history of the ships and the company and the peoples involved in the company individually. But when you study them in correlation with some of the bigger, broad sweeping stories, you realize the role that company would play in the broader scheme of Star Citizen. And I always thought that was fascinating, and I wanted to kind of talk about that. So I started making lectures, which is just me streaming and then uploading it to YouTube, then making actual videos, talking about Star Citizen lore and Star Citizen events. So it would just kind of go on like that. So I started off as just a spacebar in space to do sort of light RP of spacebar, and then eventually exploding to a lot of people know me because of my lore videos. So what do you think will happen when someone kills Chris Roberts' character in game? Will it be a big event? Yes. Vertigo's been in Deep Rock Galactic kick. Yeah, I enjoyed Deep Rock Galactic. I actually played it with the devs. It was a fun time. How come you moved to Gilded? I still use Discord, but I've been moving to Gilded because Gilded has a lot more support for discussion and promotion of streams. Like, I can give you a schedule to know when I'm streaming or when the content's coming out. Announcements are easier. It's easier to bracket some stuff. And there's a lot more. Discord still works, but Discord has been moving away from supporting streamers and that kind of thing, whereas Gilded is a little bit more focused on that. They take a lot more critique. So I've been moving towards Gilded a little bit. I still use both, but I've been using, getting in on that early platform stuff. I just linked to the Gilded in the description. So you think it likely we'll see hospitals released with the medical gameplay? 100%. I 100% believe we will have hospitals with medical gameplay. That's why we've seen them in 2 sprint reports. There's been 2 different hospitals in sprint reports, both in white box. And with medical gameplay coming out sometime in the mid to end of this year, I wouldn't be surprised if we saw those in. Just remember, he only streams 1 Friday out of 10. Depends on the Fridays. Gilded is great, but it's going to take a few years, yeah. Yeah, but the Dread Pirate Roberts isn't dead, Ghost. Chris Roberts has been dead for several hundred years in the Star Citizen lore, but the Dread Pirate Roberts isn't. Honestly, I've seen Chris fly. Chris fly. Anyone's gonna kill Chris, it's probably Chris. Only I make myself bleed my own blood. Question, has there ever been talk of Star Citizen's novels, comics, or other media? Yes. There is a Star Citizen novella that was supposed to be written as part of the pitch for the original release of the game. No idea if that's coming out or not. I don't know if it's being written by the lore team or not either. Blood for the Blood God, Skulls for the Skull Throne. I'm kind of off topic here for this one, but I'm a little upset that a lot of people will know things like Mordaka and Blood for the Blood God, and you go, oh, Warhammer 40K, it's cool, and they're like, what? It's like those 2 terms have kind of just expanded beyond the realm of Warhammer. And as someone who has way too much plastic crack, as someone who's way too much plastic crack, that makes me sad. Question, do you think enough players banded together we could build a mini Mos Eisley frontier on Daymar? Yeah, for sure. Once that comes in. Yeah, those are Warhammer references. Blood for the Blood God, Skull for the Skull Throne is something that the followers of Khorne say, of the Chaos God Khorne. And Mordaka is an orc thing from Warhammer 40k, because you can never have enough Daka. Questions. Where are the alien languages created? Why is CIG don't talk about them? They're created by a linguist who's been working with CIG for 3 to 4 years now. The Xi'an language is mostly done. The Banu language is, I think, mostly done. I think he's been working on the Vanduul language. There's some updates in terms of Vanduul language and linguistics that they're kind of hammering out with the latest monthly report for Squadron 42. So I never played 40k 2, but I know quite a bit about it, though. My brother is a huge 40k fan. Yeah. Well, the thing about 40k is that you can be a fan of the lore, you can be a fan of the game, you can be a fan of the video games, you can be a fan of painting the models. You know, it's a big community. Imperial Fists. Yeah. I currently am almost finished with a 2,000 point, well, a little more than 2,000 points at this point, Imperial Guard army, and I have primed. Like, it's all painted, and then I've got collected and primed about 2,000 points of Primaris, and I've also got some orc stuff that was gifted to me as a Christmas gift. So some orc models. Have I seen John Crew's Warhammer ships? Yes, I follow John Crew on Twitter. I know he does a lot of Warhammer stuff. Question: have you done any Captain's Table with Space Cutler? Yes. Primaris Imperial Fist is my main army. So much fun. Yeah, mine's it's going to be a custom chapter Space Wolves successor. So. All about that Tau life, you for the greater good. Wait, your background at the captain's desk is aboard the Carrack? Yeah, because it's cool. I used to own a Carrack. I don't have one anymore. Thank you, Amanda Slide. Just a fan of the aircraft in 40k. Love the Valkyrie. Won a tabletop game thanks to them. Nice. As a 40k fan, have you ever seen if the Emperor had a text-to-speech device on YouTube? I don't know if there's a Warhammer 40k fan that hasn't seen if the Emperor has a text-to-speech device on YouTube. No wonder it's John Crew, lead of the ship's team and model like that. Yeah. Yeah. John Crew has an entire war. John Crew, fun story. John Crew follows me on Twitter, not for my Star Citizen takes. He follows me exclusively for my Warhammer stuff. He's the one who I'd reach out for comments about my Imperial Guard army when I first started creating it, and he's like, that's great. For a start, good. You've painted 60 infantry for Imperial Guard. That's 500 points. Where's the next 2,000 points? That is a lot of red paint. Anyways, I'm not going to go too far into Warhammer because every time I bring up Warhammer in an office hours, someone in the comments is like, "I don't watch you for Warhammer. I watch you for Star Citizen." It's like, I know. I'm just talking, guys. I'm just talking. Tyranid Swarms, yeah. Personal choice: freelancer or MSR? Freelancer. MSR hands down. Freelancer Max or MSR? Freelancer Max. That reminds me, an orc army I figured out once. It was 1,000 points of Gretchen spread across the entire table. Impossible to kill them all. I watch you because you're my friend. I don't give a fuck what you stream about. It makes you happy. Oh, thank you, Firefly. Correct. Miss is less than max. Oh, you took Miss. I thought you said MSR. Freelancer, Miss, or Max. Miss is my preferred for smuggling, and Max is preferred for cargo running. How long do you think until CIG starts making some of us who got some questionable names on our ships? I don't know. All right, y'all. It's getting late. Thank you, Templin Institute, for showing up. Had no idea you'd actually show up, but thank you for it. Hope you enjoyed Star Citizen. Hope you enjoyed the buggy mess that is Star Citizen. Thank you all for watching, and if you want to know more about the lore, I'm going to put it up there, but there's a link to my playlist that talks about Star Citizen lore from the very beginning, kind of like a very basic breakdown of what the lore is, to more in-depth about the timeline, the system that you're in with the Stanton system, and the factions that are at play in the Star Citizen universe, plus everything from in-depth looks at the UEE government, looks at the UEE Navy, stories about individual ships, ship companies, individual events that happened in lore, longer lectures and breakdowns of various historical events in the universe, so on and so forth. So it's a huge list, 40 plus hours of content if you're interested in it. And if you're interested in more discussion about the gameplay of Star Citizen, we'll be playing Star Citizen tomorrow. But we also do a podcast on Star Citizen every Saturday called The Captain's Table. This week, we have Stim Citizen and Board Gamer coming on to talk about Star Citizen. So join us for that. And tomorrow we'll be doing a gameplay stream where we're playing Star Citizen, but we're doing a full pub crawl from the beginning of the Stanton system all the way to the end of the Stanton system, in celebration of Stella Fortuna, which is the holiday of exploration in Star Citizen, which also happens to correspond with St. Patrick's Day, so pub crawls are appropriate. So join us for that tomorrow at 6 p.m. Pacific, 9 p.m. Eastern for the start of that, and join us on Saturday at 3 p.m. Pacific, 6 p.m. Eastern for Captain's Table. You can join us a little earlier if you enjoy Star Trek and you like tabletop RPGs. Star Trek Vasquez will be playing then. And of course, we do more gameplay on Sunday. So we have a full 4 days of content for you. Join us for this event. And like I say every time, hope to see you someday in the black. And of course, remember, ex Historia ad Astra. GMT times. You don't want to know my GMT times for it's 1 a.m. GMT on Thursdays and Fridays, and it's 6 p.m. No, 11 p.m. GMT for